Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
Derek Tyler Attico. Manny, it's been a while, and thank you so much for having me. I am really, really happy to be back here on your show and to talk about the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, to talk about role playing, to just talk to you. It's been a long time.
Yes, I've been trying to find reasons to get you back on the show. I love talking to you, and we're such big nerds,
Right,
especially for Star Trek.
right.
So and I've always enjoyed what we talked about. And you've put together this great book, this interesting project called "The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko." So, all right, let's begin. What is this?
Well, I'll back it up a little and to tell your viewers, listeners, a little bit about me. My name is Derek Tyler Attico. I'm a science fiction, primarily a science fiction author, two-time winner of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds anthology, freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures role-playing game, and I am now currently the author of the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, who was a captain on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the show, for 7 years, which ran from 93 to 99, 1993 to 99, for those that were not born in that time. And how I got the project was a few different. It came at me from a few different angles. In 2016, for the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, sorry, I wrote a story for Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Now, at that time, Star Trek Strange New Worlds was an anthology series that had been running, that had run, excuse me, for 10 years. It was an anthology series started by Pocket Books. It was a really great anthology series where fans could just submit short stories to Simon and Schuster, to Pocket Books, and if those short stories were deemed good enough, they got into the anthology, and that ran for 10 years. And some of the best Star Trek writers that we have today, Dayton Ward is the primary example, or you could say the template of that. He started his career writing short stories for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and I believe after doing three of those, he was then asked to come on and write a novel. So for me, I wrote a Star Trek Strange New World story in 2005 called Alpha and Omega. And then I wrote another one in 2016. The one I wrote in 2016 was a Star Trek Deep Space Nine Benny Russell story titled The Dreamer and the Dream. And it was accepted. It did really well. It was widely received, and I was really happy. That was for the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. You jump ahead till about, I believe, 2020, 2021, somewhere around there, and there was someone was doing a podcast about the autobiographies of the captains. And this is something that is being done by Titan Books, where Titan Publishing is had this phenomenal idea to do biographies of Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Captain Picard, Captain Janeway. And someone said, well, hey, there's been no biography of Captain Sisko yet. Why hasn't there been one? And someone in the Twitterverse said, well, hey, we know who would be great to do that autobiography. It'd be this guy, Derek Attico, because in 2016, I'm going a long way around for the story, because in 2016, he wrote that story in Strange New Worlds, and it was a really good story. So the powers that be read that 2016 story and then reached out to me and said, hey, we like that 2016 Strange New World story, and we would like you to write the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. And of course, I was honored. I mean, who wouldn't be? I mean, it's Benjamin Sisko, it's Star Trek, it's a '90s pop icon, played beautifully, wonderfully, intensely by the actor Mr. Avery Brooks. So I took on that job and that responsibility to bring his origin story, his history to life in an autobiography, and that's how I got the gig.
Would you say this book includes new material about his life that's not been revealed in the Deep Space Nine series? Did you have to like kind of cross reference like other novels to see what they talked about? Let me ask, how did the research process come about?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I one of the things once I got the gig, or when I was discussing how to approach writing this with my editor George Sanderson, who is phenomenal. He's a managing editor at Titan Books and phenomenal editor and just a phenomenal human being. He and I talked about our views and our vision for what this would be. And when I told him my ideas for the approach I wanted to take, he really liked the approach, and he told me that he liked what I did in the 2016 story I did, Dreaming the Dream, but he wanted something that wasn't that was totally different, but obviously was a biography and obviously was new and unique to Cisco's story. So I thought about, what should I do? Should I look at what other people did in other books and stuff like that? And you do think about that as a writer, but I realized that my main mandate was to adhere to canon. And canon in Star Trek is everything and anything that's been on screen, whether it's the small screen on television or the large screen on film. So that's what I did. I adhered to canon always. I know other people have done different iterations and different things when it comes to Ben and his life. And I looked a little bit at things that were done, and I put a little tidbits or Easter eggs of things here and there to put nods to other people. Um, because I think the autobiography that I wrote has probably about between 50 and 100 Easter eggs that I think a lot of people will have fun spotting, and not just Deep Space Nine Easter eggs, but I took the whole breadth of Star Trek. So TOS, Discovery, um, Lower Decks, Next Gen, of course, Deep Space Nine. Uh, yeah, I have it all in this autobiography.
Mm.
Um, I really won't say um, how of how I do things, um, but I will say it's definitely new material, and and I won't say the when of where it is, because when we leave Ben Cisco, he's stuck in the wormhole. So I won't say when or the how, but I will say it's a lot of material that's new, and there's a lot of material that we know, because we're talking about a man's life,
Yeah.
and when you're talking about someone's life, and a life that we've seen part of. I wanted I wanted to root the readers in the familiar, but then to show them the things that were unfamiliar to them as well.
Mm. I'm glad you said that. I was about to ask you, like, obviously, we know how Cisco ends up at
Right,
the end of the series. So I was
right,
like, okay, he has to take a stop somewhere to finish the story.
right, right, right.
So I'm glad you answered that. So this is his perspective. This is an autobiography. So this is written as if he was writing, talking about his life, his perspective.
Right. Well, yeah, that's very interesting, because one of the ideas that was suggested to me before I actually got the gig was that it would be written totally from Jake's perspective, because as we know, in Deep Space Nine, Jake is a writer, which I think is a great approach that the writers of Deep Space Nine took, and Jake has written some of books and it within the canon of the show. we've seen that he's written some books. One of them was a book titled Anselm. I don't know if that's a correct pronunciation, but that's close. And which had biographical, autobiographical elements that were autobiographical. Let's put it like that. Um, so one of the ideas that was bounced around was that I would just do that, you know, because then that would solve certain um, that because then that would meet certain criteria that we had, you know, and so my suggestion was, well, that's cool, that's a great idea, and that book should be written at some point by someone. But I felt that um, in keeping with the other autobiographies and with what Titan has done, which is really great, this should be that captain, Benjamin Sisko, in his own words. Um, and then I explained to my editor how I felt we could do it, where having Sisko in his own words, and he was like, "Oh, that's a good idea," and I was like, "Okay, great," and so that we were off to the races after that.
Before I talk about Star Trek Adventure, I do want to talk about that.
Okay,
How this book can help out anyone playing Star Trek Adventures. But
okay,
let's do it out a little bit about Cisco.
sure,
Um, so when I was growing up, my favorite captain was Picard.
right, right,
Um,
understandable.
and one of my friends, his favorite was Cisco. We would always debate about who's the better captain. And it's funny now that I'm much older.
Right,
Um, I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, I think I like Cisco more than Picard. And now that I'm much older, I'm looking at it like, okay, I think I appreciate this. I could relate more to Cisco now that there's more kids in my life.
right, right, right. No,
you
right.
know, it's if I may ask, for Cisco, for you, what resonates to you? Why do you think Cisco is such a phenomenal captain?
That's a great question. I'm gonna back it up a little, and I will say that I agree with you, and I think that my personal take is that there's a captain for every period of a person's life. When I was real, and speaking for myself, when I was really young, I loved Kirk. You know, I was like young and brass. Kirk was young and brass. Kirk sometimes would just react and fly off the cuff, and he had Spock and Bones to pull him back. And I like that about Kirk. Picard was the thinker. The he was the person that would negotiate, and only use force when necessary. Archer was the one that was exploring, going out there, and he was really excited. But Janeway was the one that you you really had to get on her nerves. But when you did, she brought it. So all of these captains, and now we even see Pike has a certain tone and balance to him. But I think what Benjamin Sisko had then, when we first started watching, or when, because I was a first generation DS9 watcher, and even now in comparison to all the captains, is, I think, and to answer your question, I think Benjamin Sisko is still and remains to be the most balanced of all Starfleet captains that have led a series. And when I say most balanced, I'm talking about work-life balance. I'm talking about internal balance. Um, we've seen, and it's almost a stereotype of the captain that is a really good captain. We've seen that in Kirk and even in Picard. They're really good captains, but they really can't. And even Janeway, really good captains, but they can't have a life. They have this distance, and even a little bit of Archer. They have this distance from their crew. They can't have personal relationships, or when they try, it just doesn't go anywhere. Pike seems to have some balance, really, really, really well. And I understand that the themes of him being a cook is a great metaphor that, hey, this is a guy that has balance. He's a really good cook. But before, in a weird way, I know in the canon timeline, Pike comes before Sisko, but in television timeline, there was Sisko before Pike, and no other captain has been a father and a widower, uh, and a son to a father that we've seen. So we've seen this arc on Benjamin Sisko. He himself has been is a son. He himself is a father. He himself is a widower. He himself is a captain. He himself is a friend. He's all of these things, and he manages them very well. And he falters and he makes mistakes, but he manages them very well, and that gives him a balance as a leader that I believe personally is unparalleled in Star Trek. My job as the author of the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko is to show the reader how he got there. What forged that individual, what events in his life, and even what missteps in his life got him there, and gave him, in essence, a lot of that balance that we see on the screen.
Hmm. I really hope one day that Paramount will do some sort of um, maybe spin off or continuation of some sort of the Deep Space Nine
Oh,
universe, in a sense.
yes.
Because I feel like, especially Jake is much older now,
Right.
and funny enough, looks more like the actor
Right.
Cisco.
Right. 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 Avery Brooks, he looks a lot like him now.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
and so I would love to see, like, I think if I remember correctly, some novels do have a continuation of what happened to Cisco once after Deep Space Nine, some sort of the hints or things here and there. But I'd like to see something like TV show wise. But
Absolutely.
I'm going off topic a little bit. Um, so anyone that's playing Star Trek Adventures and sees this. Would you say this could be a good tool to help game masters or players?
Absolutely. If you read the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, and you're a player or a game master of Star Trek Adventures, uh, there's a few things that you could pull from this. Uh, One, I will say there's a just a plethora of material that could be used. Um, First of all, I should say understand that you have a freelance writer from Star Trek Adventures writing the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. So I'm keeping that in mind. And if you know my work in Star Trek Adventures, you probably won't be surprised if you see a few things that you might recognize in the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko.
Hmm.
That's one. Um, Two, I will say, uh, uh, as a player, if you want to look at character development and the arc of a character, um, I think this autobiography does that well and shows you how you may want to play your character, how you may want to structure your character's past, the kind of things you may want to do with your character, not to copy, but just give you. It's like, oh wow, yeah, okay, I see. Attico did this or Attico did that, and yeah, maybe I hadn't thought about how to do this kind of thing for a character's history or a character's past, and you can do that whether you're the GM or a player, and look at that and say, uh, arcing for characters and for and even now I think about it, even now for if you want to create if you actually want to create an adventure in within Star Trek Adventures, you could do that, taking elements of this work and do that as well. There are things in this work that would allow you to do that, without going saying too much. So I think there's a plethora of material that a reader that enjoys Star Trek and enjoys Star Trek Adventures could pull from this and put into back into Star Trek Adventures and have fun with.
So, with this book, were there any challenges? What would you say was probably the hardest thing to write about?
Oh wow.
If it does a spoiling thing. If it does, then we could skip this
No,
question.
no, no. I can talk around certain things. I will say a few things. One of the hardest things was when you're writing a Star Trek novel, or when you're writing a novel for a large IP like this. You just don't start writing. You have to write a an outline, and then that outline has to be approved. And I'm not telling any secrets or anything about that. It just has to be approved because this is a big deal, and they want to know what you're going to write. They don't want to go X amount of months and be like, well, what is this? So one of the challenging things was I realized I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to kind of quickly. The writer I had been until that point, I kind of came up with new ideas. I've always outlined my entire career, but I always came up with new ideas in the process of writing. And this time I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to come up with not everything, but 75 to 80% of what I want. I have to do it now because it has to be approved, and then I'm going to be locked in. I can't once it's approved, you can't then go and do whatever the heck you want, right?
Mm.
It's approved, so I can't go off the rails and say, oh well, now because I can't do that. So I had to rather quickly uh, really take the time, and I think about I think it took about a couple of days to a week to just sit and think about what I wanted for Ben. How I wanted the things in Ben's life to play out. Usually, I write a short story. I'll take a day, a couple hours. But this is this is a serious deal. So I took some serious time and thought about it, and then set off on writing the outline, and then that took some time, and then that had to get approved. So that was, I think, the major hurdle, uh, was writing the darn outline and getting that approved. And thankfully, there wasn't any, like, once I wrote the outline, it was a once it took the time to write it and write it the way I wanted it, it was approved right off the bat. So then I get to work. Um, and then I think the second thing was Avery Brooks has a certain Avery Brooks and Benjamin Sisko are the same person and yet two totally different people. Avery Brooks, when he is as an actor, when he is doing Benjamin Sisko, he's not doing anything else that he's ever done in his career. He's not doing the Man Called Hawk from Spencer for Hire. He's not doing Tamburlaine. He's not doing something from Shakespeare or Othello. He's not doing any of that. He has created a totally different character, uh, and so I could only go to that material to look for what I wanted. I could only go to Deep Space Nine material. I usually try and go to, like, for example, with Patrick Stewart, when I've written Picard, or even when I've written Shatner, when I've written Captain Kirk, I may go to something else they've done, just to get mannerisms or to get something else. But Avery Brooks he's being very laser focused, so you will really only find uh, Benjamin Sisko on Deep Space Nine. You won't see it in any other performance. That's two. The third and final hardest thing is uh, Benjamin Sisko says throughout the series. He says to Jake, and he mentions it off and on. He says, "I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. My son is the writer." So, keeping that in mind, I can't write like a writer, right? I have to
Yeah.
write, and and Benjamin Sisko uses his presence to carry what he wants to say. which is a very visual. He uses the visual medium because he's an actor and he's used to stage, he's used to television, and he's a very imposing gentleman. So he uses that. And I'm writing a book. So I'm like, okay, so I have to find a way to kind of deliver that, but not using him. And keep in mind, he's not the writer. Benjamin Sisko's not a writer. Now, Captain Picard, I can be a little bit more eloquent. I can quote Shakespeare. I can flow a little bit more because that's how Picard speaks. He does that. Even Kirk, has the thing called the Kirk speech. Kirk will do that, but that's not necessarily Sisko. I mean, he just doesn't do those things. He's a very, at least in my opinion, he's blue collar. He's not as blue collar maybe as O'Brien, but he's blue collar, sort of the earth kind of guy. So I had to keep that in mind also when writing it.
Hmm. Well, so yeah, you sold me. When does this book come out?
The book comes out October 10th, which is less than 2 months away. That's a Tuesday, I believe. I think that's also National Book Reading Month, which is great, which is very fortuitous. It's available for pre-order now, so you can pre-order, and it'll arrive, I believe, on the 10th, for everyone that pre-orders now.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up,
Yes.
why don't you share with us what are your favorite Cisco moments in Deep Space Nine?
Oh wow, that's a great question, and no one has asked me that yet. You're the first, so outstanding question, Manny. Woo. There's obviously a few. I would say probably. I would say my favorites are, my first and foremost favorite is every time Sisko kissed Jake on his forehead. You know, it's those little things. It's the little things that like when I would watch, and I picked it up watching the show, but as you're writing, you pick it up, and he kisses. He kisses Jake a lot, and that's a father saying to his son, I love you, I love you, and it's a little thing, but it's a huge thing. Two men, and we don't see that a lot. And also thinking about the fact that it's 1993 and the things that Avery Brooks was doing for that character. So I mean, I could say that he's the way he was so imposing and the way he did this and he did that, but I think that was really great. The way he infused uh, Black history and African culture. When he was off duty, you would see him in African garb. You would see African art in his quarters. That's all Avery Brooks pushing that Afrofuturism, uh, uh, positivity, which is right in line with Star Trek, and even in many ways why he will say why he took the job. Those are the moments that I really like with Cisco, and I think with other than that, I think when Cisco, we know Avery Brooks can be imposing, we know he can be hard, but seeing him soft, seeing him chuckle, seeing him sit on the couch with Dax, seeing him have a Ractigino, with O'Brien on the promenade. It's those moments that kind of rounded him out, and I really liked that because the obvious stuff we knew, but it was the other moments. It was like, oh wow, this is a man's man. This is a guy. This is like the king of. This is a king that could just be with his men. I think of that. I believe it's Henry V. I don't remember the entire speech, but the speech that the king gives where he's sitting with his men right before a war, and Cisco kind of embodies that, where he could go to war, but then he could sit with his men at the same time, and women, of course, and sit with them and relate to them, and then rounded out that character. And I really enjoyed those moments about him.
Hmm. So, viewers, let us know what's your favorite Cisco moments. I'm curious to see what people say. Um, yes, thank you so much for taking time to talk about this book. You know, I guess I've been so busy, I didn't realize these books were coming out. I did notice like here and there, like Spock autobiography. I did see something like that, like mentioned in my news, and I was like, oh, what's that about? And then when I saw it in my feed, in my social media feed about this, I'm just glad I got a chance to talk to you about it because I gotta get them all.
They're really good. Titan Books has been doing some really great work, and I've read them all, of course. And they're really good. They take some surprising directions. They're really good. Um, each and every one of them is fantastic, and I'm privileged and honored to contribute to the now fifth one in the series.
Hmm. Again, in October of 2023.
October
Um,
10th.
I will put a link in the description below. And yes, everyone, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. Live long and prosper. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.